The lesson of true wisdom lies within you, dear heroes.
Welcome, friends of the Gremmels, to Shinies and Luckydos. My name is Shirviu, and I'm here with Vaski, and in today's video, we'll be sharing our most recent speculation.
So this might be a total shock to you guys, but we actually foresee a third Sundering happening by the end of the expansion, which could potentially redo all the leveling zones Cataclysm style. We've also recently learned that Blizzard has been discussing the possibility of a level squish coming in the future. So maybe perhaps we could see some cool updates in the leveling zones down the road as well.
But gameplay reasons aside, this theory is based on the end of Legion when Sargeras plunges his sword into Silithus. We were discussing this with some folks in our Discord a few weeks back, and that got me to reading into the lore of the Scepter of Sargeras, and let's just say I had a massive revelation.
We actually got more information on Sargeras' backstory in the Warlock Order Hall as a part of the artifact research book for the Scepter of Sargeras. Now, long before the Dark Portal had been opened up, before even the time of Egwene and Medivh, Sargeras convinced Queen Azshara and her Highborn to weave his first gateway into Azeroth during the War of the Ancients.
So Tyrande and Malfurion's Kaldorei resistance actually ruin Azshara's plan, as you know, and the gateway is actually closed up and Sargeras is thrust back out into the Twisting Nether. The book goes on to say, though, and I quote, "The Dark Titan swore revenge. He would tear down the walls between himself and his prize, using a cosmic battering ram." As you may recall, we also hear mention of Sargeras' prize during the Argus the Unmaker fight in Antorus, when he says, "Master, I go to claim your prize." Ultimately, a static portal would require way too much power to allow a Titan through, so rather than relying on portals, Sargeras decides instead to just tear a rift through reality with a cosmic battering ram.
To accomplish this, Sargeras commanded the Eredar to forge the Scepter of Sargeras. He would use this to wrench open rifts between worlds just long enough for a portion of his soul to get through. The book also goes on to saying that these rifts would actually weaken the integrity of the physical universe and threaten to collapse it. I mean, this is some incredibly dangerous stuff here. And this includes the Eredar Magi basically pumping the scepter full to the brim with portals leading out into the very corner of the Great Dark. And that's why when Ner'zhul uses it on Draenor, portals open up all over the planet and just rip it apart.
What we need to take away from this so far is that the fabric of reality seemingly prevented Sargeras from accessing Azeroth from the Twisting Nether. It was the wall that he had to try and break through. So he tried using portals to get in, that didn't work, it required way too big a power source, and it would draw way too much attention to him. Sargeras actually believed that it was Azshara's grand spell work that alerted the Night Elf resistance to his plans and resulted in their failure. So he decides going forward that he'll need to enter the world with minimal warning, without the heroes noticing. Using the Scepter of Sargeras, he could lacerate the connective tissue of the physical universe, opening rifts to any realm he desired. Only a portion of his soul would be able to make it through at a time, so he had to get pretty inventive with his plans.
So what does he try to do? Well, for millennia he actually didn't try anything. He bides his time and eventually sends the Avatar of Sargeras to Azeroth with the intention of corrupting Egwene. Now, the book goes on to say that Egwene would remember the battle as the most brutal she ever fought, and she could barely even believe that she actually won. But little did she know she actually lost. And the Avatar of Sargeras had simply been a vessel with which to corrupt a guardian. First Egwene, and later her son Medivh.
Does this sound familiar to you guys? We do have the line from Okhmat's Dream Journal about a great victory that went unnoticed. Sargeras' plan was specifically to infiltrate Azeroth without being noticed, using only part of his soul to enter. You may already see where this is going, but that could be the entire point of thrusting his sword into Silithus just before the Pantheon sealed him away.
And if part of his soul were actually in the blade, That would be a perfect way to disguise his power as it entered through the rift that Illidan made between Argus and Azeroth. This would explain the unstable power contained in the blade, and hey, it might even explain why Sargeras was kind of floating above Azeroth, half manifested.
Oddly, this Warlock Order Hall book even gives us an extract from Egwene's personal journal. She writes, "I have defeated the avatar of the great enemy Sargeras, but I cannot enjoy my victory. There is a hollowness inside my breast, a persistent ache from a wound whose origin I do not know." Now, I know I'm going out on a limb saying this, it might be totally wrong, but Egwene's basically explaining what it feels like to be used as a vessel, and I wonder if that could explain Il'gynoth's whisper, "Her heart is a crater and we have filled it." Could Il'gynoth have been talking about Azeroth's heart being wounded and corrupted by Sargeras in a similar fashion to Egwene's? There's a reason Blizzard chose to write this extract into the Order Hall book, but I just don't understand exactly why. Maybe they were trying to use it as foreshadowing. She does go on to write, "Who knows what foul taint lies in wait to be released? Even in death, the corpse is malevolent, gripping its cursed scepter as if it still intends to rule."
This is exactly how we feel as players when we deal with the taint lingering in Sargeras' sword. It's such a strange feeling because we know Sargeras succeeded in doing something by stabbing the planet. But to what end? I mean, Magni then goes on instructing us that our artifacts have to pull out this malevolent power from a huge sword, and our artifacts become totally unstable in the process. The way they behave definitely seems chaotic, really, which could make sense if they basically all become vessels for Sargeras' power. This is a total tangent, but I'm wondering if making Sargeras' Dark Pantheon and corrupting Agrimar the way he did on Antaurus had anything to do with infecting them with parts of his soul.
Whatever the case may be, it's scary to think of the implications of Sargeras' power lingering on Azeroth. Not to mention the fact that Xal'atath was one of the artifacts used to absorb the sword's power, and is the only artifact whose story continues into BFA. She does have connections to N'Zoth. Could this be another victory that went unnoticed? I mean, think about it. If all we needed to do was drain the power from the sword and problem solved, that'd be a pretty poor plan on Sargeras' part. What would be the point of that? On the converse, his plan could actually have been to have Illidan open that rift, lure us out to Argus, and then just, that would basically give him the opportunity to have his sword and plunge it right into Silithus so that his soul could make it onto Azeroth unnoticed. As Ogmont says, bound by that throne, free, free.
What makes that even more worrying is that the sword is the subject of Azeroth's nightmares, the Whispers of a Frightened World quest. When you take the quest from Khadgar, he says, "It seems the fate of Azeroth is tied to that of Argus, the homeworld of the Burning Legion. We must uncover the Dark Titan's plan. I believe the speaker's connection to the World Soul will prove crucial to our efforts." And, if you recall, Magni takes us to Sholzar Basin to hear a warning from Azeroth herself, who tells us we need to stop Sargeras from striking the sword in Silithus. And we failed at that.
Now, there is one final part of the Warlock artifact book that really seals the deal on this theory. At first, it kind of just seems like a random detail. You wouldn't really understand why they were putting so much emphasis on it. But it's basically an explanation of the meaning behind the jeweled eye that tops the scepter of Sargeras. The book goes on to say that many theorize it represents Sargeras' baleful eye, but the truth is far different. Here comes the part that blew our minds. The jewel is a representation of Azeroth's eye.
You see, when Sargeras was flung back into the Twisting Nether during the first Sundering and the Well's implosion, he had a vision. He saw the Well of Eternity implode a second time. Need I remind you, a second time. But rather than throwing him out into the Nether, this time it would drag him deep down into the very core of Azeroth. He was there for only an instant, But in that moment, he saw Azeroth's slumbering world soul. And in that moment, once again, the world soul opened its eye and gazed at the Dark Titan. He was enraptured. Now, this lore is not explained anywhere else in the game, but in this book. The actual world soul of the planet has eyes and opened one. It really makes you wonder if that was really Azeroth's eye, or maybe it could have been N'Zoth all along. One of our awesome community members named Gizmo suggested this idea, and seeing as Sargeras becomes so obsessed with Azeroth following this vision, it would make a ton of sense.
The book goes on to say that since his vision, the Eye of Azeroth's world soul has not been far from Sargeras' thoughts. He commanded the Eridar who forged the scepter to crown it with that lone wondrous orb. Next to it, the Eridar placed 2 Nathrezim wings, a testament to Sargeras' conception of the world soul, corrupted, demonic, and most importantly, his. We could honestly make a whole other video on the hints Blizzard has left connecting Sargeras to N'Zoth, but we'll save that speculation for another time. What's important here and now is that Sargeras literally had a vision of a second Sundering, and Blizzard just casually slipped this information into the Warlock Artifact lore book. What we're actually thinking here is that the Well of Eternity could actually be destined to implode a second time. And could it be that when it does, Sargeras is then somehow sent hurtling towards the core of the planet, just like what happened in his vision?
And if we are in fact leading up to that, it makes a ton of sense why we're bringing Azshara back into the story in BFA. It's easy to see that Azshara's Eternal Palace is made from the exact same tree which overlooked the original Well of Eternity and tempered its waters. Now, could it be that the remnants of the destroyed well still exist, with the potential to implode a second time? I almost wonder if the remains of the well could be the Circle of Stars, you know? Everyone is suspecting the prison at the end of the raid to be N'Zoth's, but honestly, it sure looks like a Titan Soul prison, similar to the seat of the Pantheon. I wonder if it could actually be the actual band-aid itself of the original wound left by Y'Siraj, which, honestly, that powered the original well.
We've heard from Xal'atath that Azshara plans to power a massive storm to scour the planet of all non-believers. If her plan results in a second Sundering, that could be exactly what N'Zoth needs to break free. After all, the entire reason N'Zoth orchestrated both the first Sundering and the Cataclysm was seemingly to weaken his prison in the first place, to weaken the fabric of reality around the wound Amenthul tore open so long ago. Another point of interest, of course, is that the ritual itself is referred to as a scouring. Xal'atath does mention that a scouring happened once before, and was similar to both the Sundering and the Cataclysm in nature. Perhaps that event was when Y'Siraj was first ripped out, and the non-believers wiped out at that time could be the old gods and their minions.
Who knows, maybe that's what Azshara plans to use our Heart of Azeroth for. Another idea suggested by our great friend Gizmo. We do have lines from Azshara stating, yes, a Titan heart was exactly what was needed. Not to heal the world, but to shatter the prison of a god. Now, the Heart of Azeroth does of course eerily resemble the Dragon Soul, which mirrors the War of the Ancients, and the original well once again. Before we can start putting Azeroth's essence into it, Vaski even has us do a bunch of quests relating to the various dragonflights. Perhaps using the heart, she intends to power a scouring ritual which would set N'Zoth free. And by setting this off, this would be a bunch of catastrophic chain of events. Could that be what Il'gynoth was referring to when the whisper, at the hour of her third death, she will usher in our coming? Tyrande does say at the Temple of Elune in Val'sharah, in my lifetime, I have twice witnessed the sundering of the world. Mother Moon, I pray I do not see a third. Now, whether Tyrande does live to see it or not, it's very fascinating that Sargeras envisioned this final sundering so long ago.
To put it all together, what we're suggesting here is that N'Zoth has manipulated events to cause a second implosion of the Well of Eternity, leading to another sundering of the world. The explosion could send Sargeras' sword deeper into the planet, and who knows what damage that would cause. Perhaps the sword being sent through the core of the planet could be what Sargeras saw in his vision when he was sent hurtling towards the core of the planet, if it is part of his soul inside it. Instead of waking up Azeroth, though, we could be awakening N'Zoth, or, I don't know, maybe they both wake up. After all, does it matter who wins the battle for Azeroth if there's nothing left for the victor to claim?
And with that, well, that's the theory. We'd love to know what you think about that idea of a second Sundering with the Well of Eternity. I mean, it might not be this expansion. It could be a few years even yet. But we would love to know what you guys think this could be a possible direction for the game in order to revamp the leveling experience. We really hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you again so much for watching. As always, we invite you to check out our Discord channel, our Twitch, and our Twitter, and the links will be down in the description box below for you guys. But once again, farewell, friends of the Gremmels. May your feet find some darn good trails.